Christmas at home. The very air in that house felt heavy with unspoken resentments, a thick fog of forced pleasantries clinging to the gaudy decorations. The saccharine aroma of Mom's perpetually singed sugar cookies, once a nostalgic marker of the season, now felt like a deliberate taunt, a reminder of the superficial sweetness that masked a bitter undercurrent. As I stepped across the familiar threshold, the weight of years of being subtly belittled settled upon me, an invisible burden I'd carried in silence for far too long. My parents, Robert and Clara, were already ensconced on their worn floral sofa, their faces bearing that practiced blend of strained welcome and that ever-present, barely concealed judgment in their eyes. And then there was Chloe, my younger sister, practically melded to the plush armchair, her attention laser-focused on the glowing rectangle in her hands, the expensive noise-canceling headphones a deliberate barrier against the real world and, more specifically, against me. "Alice, you're here." Mom's voice, pitched a little too high, echoed through the room, carrying that familiar note of manufactured enthusiasm, the kind she deployed when maintaining a facade of familial harmony was deemed absolutely essential. Dad offered a curt, almost dismissive nod, his gaze immediately snapping back to the muted figures engaged in some sporting contest on the television screen in the corner. Chloe offered nothing more than a dismissive grunt, a barely perceptible acknowledgement of my presence, her thumbs continuing their relentless assault on her phone's screen. "Wouldn't miss the annual gathering of cheer," I replied, my tone laced with a carefully concealed layer of sarcasm that I knew would likely fly straight over their heads, lost in the usual din of their self-absorption. I placed my carefully selected gift beneath the burgeoning pile under the Christmas tree, a silent offering in the hopes of perhaps, just perhaps, eliciting a flicker of genuine appreciation in return. It all began so innocently years ago, with a fragile spark of an idea, a fierce, unwavering desire to build something meaningful, something entirely my own. I took the plunge, diving headfirst into the turbulent waters of entrepreneurship, pouring every ounce of my energy, my dwindling savings, my very heart and soul into launching my tech startup. It was a relentless, often brutal, roller coaster of exhilarating triumphs that were all too fleeting and soul-crushing setbacks that felt insurmountable. And every single time I dared to share even a glimmer of my arduous journey with my family, naively hoping for a single word of genuine encouragement, a fleeting glimpse of pride in their eyes, it was invariably met with a wall of polite, almost patronizing indifference, inevitably followed by the well-intentioned but ultimately soul-destroying comparison to Chloe's seemingly more conventional success. "Oh, that's nice, dear," Mom would say, her gaze already flitting towards Chloe, as if my accomplishments were merely a tedious preamble to the real news. "Chloe just got another promotion at Omnicorp. Fortune 500, you know. Such a reputable company. Real security in that." Her tone always carried the unspoken, but crystal clear implication that my entrepreneurial pursuits were nothing more than a whimsical hobby, a fleeting fancy destined to eventually crumble under the weight of its own instability. "Freelancing is a tough road, Alice," Dad would invariably chime in, shaking his head with that air of paternal wisdom he always seemed to possess when it came to my life choices. "Chloe's got her comprehensive benefits package, her steady, reliable paycheck, those valuable stock options. That's what truly offers peace of mind. That's what we genuinely worry about for you." Their worry, I knew deep down, was nothing more than a thinly veiled form of disapproval, a deeply ingrained belief that I had somehow chosen a less respectable, less secure, and ultimately, less worthy path in life. The Christmas evenings, like all our meticulously staged family gatherings, always unfolded according to the same predictable, soul-numbing script. The initial pleasantries felt forced and brittle, like actors reciting well-worn lines from a play they had long since grown weary of performing. We'd exchange superficial updates about distant relatives whose names I could barely recall and the predictably dreary holiday weather, and then, with an almost ritualistic inevitability, the conversation would veer sharply towards the well-trodden territory of careers, with Chloe's often exaggerated accomplishments invariably taking center stage. "So, Chloe darling, how are things progressing at Omnicorp?" Dad would ask, his voice suddenly warm and brimming with paternal pride as he turned his full attention to my sister, effectively rendering me invisible. "Really great, actually. They're talking about expanding my department yet again. Chloe would reply, finally deigning to lift her perfectly manicured gaze from her phone, a small, self-satisfied smirk playing around her perfectly glossed lips. Lots of room for advancement, you know. That's just fantastic, sweetie. See, Alice? That's the kind of solid, dependable foundation we're talking about. Mom would chime in, reaching over to pat Chloe's hand with an almost reverent gesture, as if Chloe had personally invented the very concept of corporate achievement. That's wonderful news, Chloe. My company, Spark Innovations, is also experiencing significant and sustained growth and success, I'd offer, trying to inject a genuine note of enthusiasm into the conversation. A desperate, perhaps foolish, attempt to be seen, to be acknowledged as something more than the family's quirky, slightly embarrassing entrepreneur. Mom and Dad would exchange that now familiar, almost imperceptible glance, a silent, loaded communication passing between them that spoke volumes of their shared concern and thinly veiled disappointment in my stubbornly unconventional choices. Chloe would often punctuate these moments with a soft, dismissive snort, a sound so subtle it barely registered above the cheerful strains of Christmas carols playing softly in the background, yet it always managed to cut me deeper than any overtly harsh or critical word. "Oh, right. Your little venture," Chloe would say, her tone dripping with a condescension so thick it could practically be spread on toast, as she returned her unwavering gaze to her phone, her perfectly manicured thumbs already resuming their lightning-fast dance across the screen, her attention span for my life's work apparently capped at a staggering 3 seconds. Little venture. That's what they'd always called it. My passion, my relentless dedication, the countless sleepless nights fueled by lukewarm coffee and sheer willpower, the constant, demanding pressure to innovate, to secure crucial funding in a cutthroat market, to build something truly meaningful and impactful from the barest of foundations, all of it consistently and casually reduced to a patronizing little venture. They had absolutely no comprehension of the sheer grit, the unwavering determination, the constant sacrifices I'd willingly made. For years, while they were busy showering Chloe with effusive praise and extolling the predictable virtues of her comfortable, predictable corporate career, Spark Innovations was quietly, steadily, relentlessly growing, evolving from a fledgling idea into a formidable force. We'd successfully navigated several high-stakes funding rounds, attracting the serious attention and substantial financial backing of some of the most influential and discerning investors in Silicon Valley. We weren't just a scrappy, hopeful startup clinging to survival anymore. We were a thriving, multi-million-dollar company, rapidly expanding and poised for even greater, more impactful things. But they remained stubbornly, almost willfully, oblivious, their perception of my professional life rigidly fixed within their narrow, outdated worldview. "Oh, Alice, you're such a lifesaver. We honestly don't know what we'd do without your generous contributions. Chloe's salary is good, of course, but, well, you understand our ongoing needs," Mom had said the previous Christmas, accepting my generously sized check with a practiced air of entitlement, as if it were simply my familial duty, my primary, perhaps even sole purpose within the family dynamic. "You're a good daughter, Alice. The only one who truly understands our financial realities. We are, as always, incredibly grateful for your continued support," Dad had added, patting my arm absently, his gaze already drifting towards the television screen, his mind clearly preoccupied with the unfolding sports drama rather than any genuine appreciation for my generosity. The sheer, staggering hypocrisy of it all had been festering within me for what felt like an eternity, a slow-burning ember of resentment that was finally, irrevocably, starting to ignite into a raging inferno. I was the one consistently, quietly ensuring their mortgage payments were made on time. Their various utility bills were promptly covered. Their comfortable, predictable lives continued without so much as a financial hiccup. Yet, in their eyes, I remained somehow perpetually less successful, less accomplished, fundamentally less worthy of their genuine pride and unwavering belief. They even indulged in those seemingly innocuous little jokes, those subtly barbed comments veiled in the guise of festive cheer about how Chloe was their only real daughter, the one who had truly made them proud. Each seemingly insignificant remark was like another tiny, almost imperceptible pinprick, slowly and deliberately deflating my already fragile festive spirit, leaving behind a dull, persistent ache of being perpetually undervalued, unseen, and ultimately unappreciated. This year, however, the familiar sting felt different. The years of silently swallowing their condescension, of absorbing their subtle jabs, were finally starting to crystallize into something far more potent, far more strategically calculated. The dawn of the new year ushered in a period of intense, almost feverish activity at Spark Innovations. We were in the final, crucial stages of a monumental acquisition, a strategic maneuver that had been meticulously planned, fiercely negotiated, and kept under tight wraps for months, a move that would not only propel our company into an entirely new echelon of growth and influence, but would also send significant and undeniable shockwaves rippling throughout our entire industry. The negotiations were complex, often fraught with nail-biting tension. The stakes were astronomically high, but we were on the very precipice of a true game-changer, a bold move that would fundamentally redefine our market position and solidify our standing as a major player. And the company we were poised to acquire? The very same one that my family held in such unwavering esteem, the company that, in their narrow, conventional worldview, represented the very antithesis of my own often misunderstood entrepreneurial endeavors. Omnicorp. Chloe's beloved Fortune 500 company, the undisputed epitome of corporate success and stability in their eyes. Initially, I'll readily admit, it wasn't a consciously calculated act of cold, hard revenge. Our primary focus had always been on sustainable strategic growth, on meticulously identifying companies that not only seamlessly aligned with our long-term vision and ambitious goals, but could also significantly complement our existing technological strengths and market reach. Omnicorp was a clear and undeniable leader in its specific sector, possessing a wealth of valuable intellectual property, a robust existing infrastructure, and a significant, established market share that would undoubtedly enhance our overall portfolio and provide us with a crucial and immediate competitive advantage. But as the intricate details of the acquisition process began to unfold, as the exhaustive due diligence was meticulously completed, and the sheer scale and potential impact of the acquisition became undeniably, breathtakingly apparent, a certain undeniable and frankly rather delicious sense of satisfaction began to slowly simmer beneath the surface of my otherwise purely professional focus. The company that my family so openly and consistently admired, the company that represented everything they so firmly and mistakenly believed I wasn't, was now, incredibly, about to become an integral part of my own little venture. The irony wasn't just delicious. It was almost a divinely orchestrated twist of fate, a karmic wink from the universe. The acquisition was finalized. The last legal documents were signed. The ink was dry, and the deal was officially, irrevocably done. Spark Innovations, the company they had so casually dismissed with a wave of their hand, the little project they had so readily scoffed at and subtly mocked, had successfully acquired Omnicorp in a multi-billion-dollar transaction that sent significant ripples of surprise, speculation, and more than a little bit of envy throughout the global business community. I knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within the very core of my being, that I had to tell them, not with any intention of childish gloating or petty vindictiveness, not to rub their noses in my success with any sense of malicious glee, but simply because, after all these long, arduous years of their subtle, unwavering condescension and their unwavering belief in Chloe's inherent professional superiority, they deserved to finally confront the unvarnished, undeniable truth. They needed to understand the full scope and magnitude of what I had quietly, diligently, and against their constant subtle disapproval, built while they were so busy showering Chloe with undeserved praise for simply existing within the comfortable confines of corporate mediocrity. I carefully typed out a concise message into the family group chat, my fingers hovering over the send button for a long, pregnant moment, a silent battle waging within me between my desire for vindication and a lingering sense of familial obligation, before I finally, decisively, pressed the digital send icon. Just wanted to share some news. Spark Innovations has officially acquired Omnicorp. My phone vibrated almost instantaneously, the screen lighting up with a chaotic and frankly rather panicked barrage of messages. Wait, what? Are you completely serious right now? Omnicorp? Followed by an almost comical string of utterly bewildered, shocked, and frankly terrified emojis. Chloe even responded with a single, utterly lost and profoundly confused question mark, a digital representation of her shattered reality. I decided that a direct phone call was in order, a real-time, voice-to-voice conversation to cut through the digital static and allow me to witness their immediate reactions firsthand, to hear the precise moment their carefully constructed worldview began to crumble. I dialed Mom's number, a strange and complex mix of nervous anticipation, a long-suppressed desire for validation, and yes, a growing sense of triumphant satisfaction churning within me. Alice, are you actually pulling my leg right now? Omnicorp? How on this green earth? Her voice on the other end was a strangled, almost choked concoction of utter disbelief and rapidly escalating, unmistakable panic. It's not a joke, Mom. It's absolutely official. Spark Innovations is now the proud parent company of Omnicorp. The deal closed this morning. My voice remained calm, almost unnervingly so, a deliberate and perhaps slightly cruel contrast to the rising hysteria in her tone. A heavy, almost suffocating silence descended on the other end of the line. I could practically hear the frantic calculations whirring in her mind, the sudden seismic shift in her carefully constructed perception of our respective levels of success. But Chloe works there. What does this mean for her job security? Her voice was now undeniably laced with a raw, palpable fear, a stark departure from her usual tone of maternal superiority. Yes, she does. In fact, she now works directly for my company. We're still in the initial phases of assessing the overall organizational structure and identifying key talent, but I am confident that there will be ample opportunities for individuals with talent and dedication. I deliberately kept my tone neutral, almost detached, allowing the full, potentially devastating weight of my words to slowly sink in. Chloe called next, her usual air of confident superiority completely and utterly shattered, replaced by a tone of pale apprehension and genuine, unadulterated worry that I had never heard from her before. Alice, I honestly don't understand any of this. What does this mean for my job? Are you even considering? Are you going to fire me? Her voice trembled, a stark and, I won't lie, rather satisfying departure from her usual dismissive and condescending pronouncements. That's not my immediate intention, Chloe. Omnicorp has a lot of talented and experienced people, and we certainly recognize the inherent value of their existing expertise. We're still in the very early stages of the integration process, but I am reasonably confident that there will be significant opportunities for everyone who demonstrates consistent dedication and relevant skills. I paused for a beat, allowing my next words to hang heavy in the digital air between us, the unspoken threat lingering. Ultimately, however, the future of Omnicorp, and indeed, the future of all its employees, is now firmly and irrevocably within my purview. This wasn't solely about belated familial recognition anymore. The countless years of being consistently overlooked, the endless, tiresome stream of comparisons, the subtle and sometimes overtly blatant jabs at my career choices, they had all coalesced, fueling a quiet but undeniably powerful fire within me. While my initial motivation for pursuing the complex acquisition of Omnicorp was undoubtedly rooted in sound strategic business growth, the stark and undeniable realization that I now held the very fate of the company my family so unequivocally revered, and by direct and rather delicious extension, the carefully constructed trajectory of my sister's perfectly ordinary corporate career, squarely and firmly in my hands, well, let's just say a certain undeniable and profoundly gratifying sense of satisfaction began to bloom and flourish within the deepest recesses of my being. It wasn't merely about enacting petty, childish revenge, about impulsively firing Chloe or making her professional life a living hell simply for the sake of it. It was about finally, unequivocally wielding the power that they had so readily and consistently denied me for so long, the power to show them, in no uncertain terms, just how profoundly and spectacularly wrong they had been in their narrow-minded assessment of my capabilities, my ambition, and my ultimate potential. The game, as they say, had irrevocably changed, and this time, I was holding all the trump cards, and I was finally, with a quiet sense of almost serene determination, ready to play them precisely as I saw fit. The years of being the underdog were officially over. Now it was my turn to call the shots. And trust me, this is just the beginning. So that's where we are. My little venture, The one they so readily dismissed with a condescending wave of their hand, has not only managed to survive the brutal world of startups, but has thrived beyond their wildest, most limited imaginations, culminating in the stunning acquisition of the very company they held up as the untouchable gold standard of success. And while pure, unadulterated revenge wasn't my sole driving force in this complex business decision, there's an undeniable and frankly rather exquisitely delicious sense of poetic justice in knowing that the company they admired so much, the ultimate symbol of everything they mistakenly believed I wasn't capable of achieving, is now firmly and completely under my control. Maybe, just maybe, this dramatic turn of events will finally serve as a much-needed wake-up call, finally open their eyes to the multifaceted truth that success manifests in countless forms, and that sometimes the quietest and most underestimated individuals are the ones who ultimately possess the most significant and transformative power. The days following the announcement were a blur of media frenzy and internal meetings at Spark Innovations. But amidst the whirlwind of my professional life, the silence from my family was deafening. For a week, my phone remained stubbornly dark. No frantic calls from Mom, no panic texts from Chloe, not even a terse, disapproving email from Dad. It was as if they had collectively decided to pretend the entire thing hadn't happened, or perhaps they were simply too stunned to react. Then the silence finally broke. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. It was Dad. Short, cold, and demanding, "We need to talk. Tonight. Our house. 7 p.m. There was no question, no invitation, just a flat command. A wave of conflicting emotions washed over me. Apprehension, a flicker of the old obligation, but mostly a steely resolve. This was it. The confrontation I knew was inevitable. As I walked back into their house that evening, the atmosphere was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mom sat rigidly on the sofa, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. Dad stood by the fireplace, his arms crossed, his jaw tight with barely suppressed anger. Chloe was conspicuously absent. So Dad began, his voice low and gravelly, "You've really done it." "Yes, Dad. Spark Innovations now owns OmniCorp," I replied, my voice calm and steady, refusing to be intimidated by his hostile demeanor. Mom finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "But why, Alice? Why would you do this?" "Why?" I echoed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. After years of being dismissed, of being told my hard work was just a little venture, of being constantly compared to Chloe, you really have to ask why. Dad's face flushed. "That's not fair, Alice. We were just concerned for your future." "Concerned?" I challenged, stepping further into the room. "Or were you just reinforcing your own outdated ideas of success? You celebrated Chloe's every minor achievement while barely acknowledging my groundbreaking work. You treated me like a glorified ATM while praising her real job. Well, guess what? My little venture is now worth more than you can probably comprehend, and it just swallowed up the company you held in such high regard." Mom's composure finally cracked, and tears began to stream down her face. "But Chloe, what about Chloe? What are you going to do to her?" "That, Mom, depends entirely on Chloe," I said, my gaze unwavering. "OmniCorp has many talented employees. If Chloe is one of them, she has nothing to worry about. But if she expects special treatment simply because we share DNA, she's in for a rude awakening." The conversation continued in this vein for what felt like hours. They pleaded, they argued, they even tried to guilt-trip me, reminding me of all the sacrifices they had made for me over the years, conveniently forgetting the decade of financial support I had provided them. But something had shifted within me. The years of seeking their approval, of craving their validation, had finally come to an end. Their words no longer held the same power over me. The next day, I had a meeting scheduled with the senior leadership team at OmniCorp. As I walked into the imposing boardroom, I could feel the weight of my new position. These were the people who had once represented the pinnacle of corporate success in my family's eyes, and now they were reporting to me. And then I saw her. Sitting at the far end of the table, looking pale and anxious, was Chloe. Our eyes met for a brief, charged moment. I could see a mixture of fear and resentment in her gaze. The meeting began, and I laid out my vision for the future of OmniCorp under Spark Innovations. I spoke about innovation, growth, and a commitment to excellence. I treated everyone in that room with the respect they deserved, including Chloe. I acknowledged her experience and her contributions to the company. After the formal meeting adjourned, I asked Chloe to stay behind. The room emptied, leaving just the two of us. The silence felt heavy, thick with unspoken words. So I began, my voice calm but firm. Here we are. Chloe finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. Alice, please don't take my job away from me. This is everything to me. Everything. I raised an eyebrow. More than family? More than acknowledging the person who was quietly supporting your entire lifestyle for years. She looked down, shamefaced. I didn't realize. No, you didn't, I said, my voice softening slightly. You were too busy basking in the praise while I was building something real. Look, Chloe, I'm not a monster. I'm not going to fire you just to be vindictive. But things are going to be different. OmniCorp is now part of Spark Innovations, and everyone, including you, will have to earn their place. I outlined a new role for her, one that leveraged her existing skills but also required her to step outside her comfort zone and prove her worth within the new structure. It wasn't a demotion, but it wasn't the same cushy position she had before. It was an opportunity to actually grow, to actually contribute in a meaningful way, without the safety net of her previous status. The following weeks were a period of significant change. OmniCorp began to integrate with Spark Innovations, and there were some inevitable layoffs as we streamlined operations. It was a tough process, but I was determined to build a stronger, more innovative company. As for my family, things remained strained. Mom and Dad called occasionally, their tone a mixture of resentment and a grudging respect for my newfound power. Chloe kept her distance, focusing on proving herself in her new role. Then, a few months later, I received an unexpected email. It was from Chloe. It was short, but it said more than I could have imagined. Alice, I think I finally understand. Thank you for the opportunity. A small smile touched my lips. It wasn't the grand, dramatic apology I might have once craved, but it was a start. The truth is, the revenge wasn't as satisfying as I had initially imagined. The real satisfaction came from proving them wrong, from building something incredible despite their constant doubt. The acquisition of OmniCorp wasn't just a business deal. It was a statement. It was me finally taking control of my own narrative. Did I get my revenge? Maybe in a way. But what I truly gained was my own sense of self-worth, independent of my family's narrow expectations. I built something amazing, and in the end, that's the most satisfying victory of all.